Welcome back to La Pausa, a Pints and Punditry podcast here at the Pitchside Pub. It is Monday, March 25th. This is episode 18, and we are coming off a big United States victory over Mexico to win the Nations League, and that's about all the excitement I can fake about it, because, it was a good win. It was a good win, and there is technically a trophy involved. But that's really the level of excitement that we should have with this. The U.S. took care of business and won a trophy in a tournament that doesn't really mean anything. So, good win. Hey, that's fun. But we're going to talk about that rivalry, the U.S.-Mexico rivalry today, and what goes into a rivalry and where it stands on the international scale, because that's a topic of conversation that came up over the weekend that I want to dive into today. But before we do, make sure you hit that subscribe button for me. If you're watching on YouTube, hit it down below. Go ahead and follow the podcast on Spotify if that's where you listen. Get in that comment section. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. U.S. fans, Mexico fans, fans from around the world, because I'm going to fight off some serious USA homerism here. And of course, make sure you follow us on Twitter at Pitchside Pub. So, U.S.-Mexico. It is the biggest rivalry in this hemisphere, and in the northern part of this hemisphere, in CONCACAF. It's a big rivalry. It is a big rivalry on the international stage that is being diminished because Mexico is not what it once was. But I'm bringing this up not to diminish what happened over the weekend. The U.S. took care of business. They won the Nations League. The Nations League is a tournament that does not really mean a whole lot. It gets you into the Gold Cup. The Gold Cup is the one that has more to do with World Cup qualifying, which of course doesn't matter to the U.S. this cycle anyway. But the Nations League doesn't really carry a lot of weight. But the U.S. did win it for the third time in a row. And by doing that, by winning it now a few times in a row, they continue to establish themselves as the dominant force in CONCACAF. And I can't say this does it. They've done it before. They've done this for a while now. And they are far and away the best team in the region, which is part of why this is not more exciting. This is not a testament to how great of a coach Greg Berhalter is. No, you could probably have dropped just about any competent American coach, or non-American coach for that matter, in on this team, and they should still be expected to win this tournament. The talent level in CONCACAF is just not up to where the U.S. is. No one else is nearly as good. Canada has had some good stretches. Mexico has been good in the past, but they're not now, and Canada's fallen off a little bit, and so they should win these tournaments. So, hey, credit where it's due. They took care of business, and they played relatively well. They got some good performances from really good players, and so that's about all the excitement I can muster over it, which is part of why the U.S.-Mexico rivalry is not the best in the world, as was stated ridiculously over the weekend by Alexi Lalas and his State of the Union podcast crew. He said this it went viral on social media, and it's just such a ridiculous statement because he knows that's not true. And it's a combination of a number of things. It's some United States homerism, and it's wanting to make his previous legacy more impactful. He had some scuffles with Mexico back in his days. But really, it's just clickbait. And of course, I'm guilty of falling into that because I'm making a whole podcast episode combating it. But it's a ridiculous statement to say that the United States and Mexico is the best international rivalry in the world. And that was the statement that he made. And it's uneducated at best, but I don't think he's that uneducated. I think it's massive homerism combined with wanting to elicit a response for his podcast. So, but I want to talk about rivalries because they are important. They are at the heart of sports, and here's why the U.S. and Mexico is not the best in the world. And I want to go on record. It's a good one. It's a good rivalry on the international level, but it is not the best by any stretch. Because a rivalry takes three things to make it great. One, the players have to genuinely dislike each other, or at least be competitive enough to have that come out on the pitch. There needs to be some scraps, some scuffles, some intensity. You don't have to get into a fist fight every time. There doesn't have to be that level of it, but there has to be some sort of dislike between the players. I will say the U.S. and Mexico seems to have that one. This match yesterday was not all that scrappy. The fans were worse. But it has in the past been, it has gotten a little ugly. It has gotten scrappy. There's a genuine dislike there between the players on the two teams. So it meets that criteria. That's a good one. The second one is both teams have to be good. Now, that is a definition that can change from year to year, from time to time, from match to match. And rivalries don't, necessarily go up and down with that level of change. Although rivalries do grow and get better, and then rivalries die off. The issue with USA and Mexico is that it has not been that often that both teams are good at the same time. Now, a few years ago, this was more prominent as Mexico's decline was beginning and the new generation of American players were just coming on, the Pulisics, the McKinneys, the Adamses, and they were young and not quite ready yet, but they stepped up and they showed that they were ready to play with teams like Mexico. And that was probably the height of the rivalry in recent years. I'm not going to go back 30, 40 years, but in recent years, that was the height of it because when the two teams met, particularly the first time, the first time the U.S. beat them in the 20th century, or in the 2020s, I should say, in the 20-teens it probably was, that was really a very evenly matched game, and that really helps a rivalry. When you have a good rivalry, it's always better when the teams are evenly matched, and there's a genuine competition at stake here, and that was what was missing last night. Is Mexico has not been good for a while now, for a few years, and it is very apparent that they are not anywhere near the level of the United States right now. And so there wasn't a lot of doubt going into this game that the United States was going to take care of business and that they should win this game. And this game was never really contested. The U.S. sort of had control from the start. I wouldn't say they dominated, but they had control from the start. They got their goals early enough, and they put it away. And there wasn't really a lot of question as to whether or not that was ever going to be in danger. And so that does diminish a rivalry. So if you're doing some sort of ranking of rivalries, you may see some changes in that ranking depending on how the teams are doing. But generally speaking, the U.S. and Mexico have been relatively evenly matched, just maybe not always at the same time. But on the world stage, they are, and that gets to point number 3, which is for a rivalry to be the best in the world or to be better than another rivalry, it has to matter. It has to matter more. More has to be at stake. And that's really the issue with this rivalry. You cannot compare it to Brazil and Argentina, which I think is the best rivalry in international football. And I don't think it's close, by the way. I think it's them, and then I think it's everybody else. If they're 1, then 2 through 10, you can start making arguments for, but they are here, and everybody else is down here. Because not only do they genuinely hate each other, and not only are they always very good, but they're equally good, but they're also very good on the world stage. Argentina just won a World Cup. Brazil has a whole bunch of them. They are always competing for the top levels. The United States and Mexico simply are not. And so you can have a rivalry that matters a lot to the teams involved. You can have a local high school that is great rivals with another local high school, and it matters a ton to them, but it doesn't matter anywhere else other than that little sphere. And that's sort of what the U.S. and Mexico is. You cannot rank it that high on the world stage because no one else cares. This game last night had zero impact on the rest of the world. Nobody outside of the United States and Mexico and maybe the rest of the CONCACAF region was even watching it. And that the same cannot be said for Brazil-Argentina if they met in the Copa America final. Or if England, when England met Italy in the Euros, right? Everybody watched that. The United States watched it. I watched that. I went to a bar that had 500 people and watched it there. You cannot compare that. And yes, this was the Nations League, not the Gold Cup, which is our closest analogy to the Euros. But even still, if this was the United States versus Mexico in the Gold Cup final, it's not being shown at a packed British pub in London. It's just not. No one really cares. Whereas Brazil-Argentina in the Copa America final is going to be broadcast everywhere. England-Italy, or if it's England-France or England-Germany or Germany-France, or pick your combination. Spain-Portugal, my God, what a rivalry. Netherlands and Belgium is a great rivalry. There's so many good ones in Europe because of the close proximity and because well, there's a lot of historical reasons why. But any of those combinations is going to have a larger impact worldwide. And if that's in a Euro final, I'm stopping what I'm doing that Saturday and I'm going to go watch it. And I don't think the same thing's happening in Belgium for the USA-Mexico final in the Gold Cup. Maybe if they meet in the Copa America final, but even then, probably not. Fans abroad will lose interest because it's not Brazil and Argentina. Not that there's any shot of that happening. So that relevance matters. That relevance matters. So it cannot be on the same level on the global stage because nobody else around the globe gives a shit about it. That's why that's blatantly wrong, and that's why that is wild American homerism. The last part, the fourth variable, is that it doesn't matter enough to the American fans. It simply doesn't. And I don't mean the American soccer fans. Don't get me wrong here. Passionate American soccer fans are just that. They are passionate. They are invested. They are just as into their team as English fans are to England or Brazilian fans are to Brazil. The problem is that is such a small portion of our population. If Brazil and Argentina are playing in the Copa America final, you could not walk down the street in Brazil and find someone who does not know about it. Same thing in England. When England was in the Euros, that was the talk of the nation. I'll bet you most people didn't even know the U.S. was playing last night. And if they do, they couldn't tell you what the Nations League is. Now, again, part of that is because the Nations League tournament doesn't really matter. But that matters. That's part of the equation, too. They're playing in tournaments that don't really matter, and we're trying to make a big deal out of it. It's not the same. It's not the same. And so if you don't have that cultural resonance, then the rivalry can't possibly be as good, as intense, as relevant. The Euros, everybody, as these nations progress in the Euros, everybody knows about it. Everybody in the country knows about it. When Portugal won the Euros in 2016, that was a massive national event in Portugal. Here, if we win the Gold Cup, most Americans don't even know what happens unless they see it. Maybe they see a highlight on the Today Show the next day if it's a slow news day. But it doesn't resonate outside of the diehard American soccer fans. And again, I'm not knocking them. The U.S. fan base is passionate. But you've got, for you to have a rivalry on the international stage that is going to be among, if not the best in the world, you have to get outside of sports. Those are the truly global sporting events, are the ones that transcend sports and captivate the entire nation. The World Cup will do that. If the United States makes a deep run into the World Cup, people will know. Your aunt will know. Your mom will know. Your non-soccer fans, your buddies who watch sports but think soccer's dumb, they will know. They will start to watch that all of a sudden. That's when it transcends sports. But a USA-Mexico game, even in the final of a tournament, does not do that. It does not do that. And you can't tell me otherwise. And it does in other countries. And that's why those rivalries are better. So Brazil-Argentina, hands down number one. You can probably take any combination of traditional European powerhouses, be it England, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal. You could take just about any combination of those, and it's probably a better rivalry. I would personally go with England-Germany, history, relevant there. Spain-Portugal, Netherlands-Belgium, all are more impactful than USA-Mexico. USA-Mexico falls somewhere into the bottom part of that tier if we were really doing a ranking, but they are nowhere near Brazil-Argentina, and I would say they don't have the global resonance of any of those European combinations. There are also great rivalries in Africa and in the Asian Cup that don't get enough credit, partly because they're difficult to watch globally. I know I had trouble watching a lot of the AFCON games here. So there has to be a global cultural resonance and relevance, and USA-Mexico simply does not have it. Now, if Mexico gets back to the point where they are on the same competitive stage as the United States by 2026 for the World Cup, and both maintain that level and are actually vying for a World Cup title, then perhaps it raises almost to the level of Argentina-Brazil. It's still not there. There's still not enough history of both clubs being good and global cultural resonance. But at least it would be closer. But until that happens, and the way Mexico's trending, that's not even close to coming to fruition. Until that happens, they're just not on that same level. It is a second, maybe third tier international rivalry at best, but it's the best one we got, and it's always great to see the United States beat Mexico, take care of their rivalry. I'll be honest, it's more fun when the other team is good. I've said that in many videos. I want my rivals to be at their peak when we beat them because it's more fulfilling. This was not even that fulfilling of a victory. You sort of knew they were going to go take care of business, and they did. It was very workmanlike. But again, credit to them where it's due. But let's keep this in perspective of where the United States stands on the international scale. We are not that relevant yet. We have a chance to change that coming up. If the United States makes a run or actually wins the Copa America tournament, that would be a statement that U.S. soccer is here to play with the big boys and should be more relevant on the global stage. If we manage to make a deep run or possibly, God help us, actually win the World Cup, that would announce to the world that we are relevant on the global stage. That, of course, would do it. But even a deep run to the semis or even the round of 8 would at least put us in that conversation of hey, you got to watch us even when we're only playing in our own region, right? To get those regional games into the global cognizance. That would help do it. But again, Mexico's got to do their part for this rivalry to make it worth watching. Because right now, USA goes home to CONCACAF, and there's nobody there to make it worth watching if you're not a fan of one of the teams. USA is just going to run roughshod over the entire region. So you need both sides to do their part. Mexico is currently not doing that, but even when they are, it just does not resonate globally, and that's why what Alexi Lalas and his crew said was just so utterly ridiculous and clearly just clickbait fodder and or trying to amp up his own legacy from back in the day when he played in these matches, or just some massive nationalistic homerism that if he really believes that, he should not be one of the faces of American soccer coverage. And that's part of why I made this channel, is I think the coverage of the game that we have in this country is so subpar. And it's littered with former U.S. men's national team players from when I was growing up. These guys are all about my age, in the 90s and early 2000s. And there's no level of accountability or actual acumen to have these guys have a job. And a guy like Alexi Lalas has his podcast. And look, anybody can have a podcast. Look at me. I'm just an idiot with a microphone. But it doesn't make you good at what you do. I will say, I do want to go on record. Tony Miola, who did the commentary during these games and does work on Sirius XM radio on the FC channel, he's fantastic. He is fantastic. So some of these guys do a good job, and there are others, but he's the one that comes to mind because I was just listening to him yesterday during the game, and I listen to him a lot during the day. But he does a good job, but not all these guys really do great commentary. Alexi Lalas, you can't possibly believe the stuff you're saying. So that's my rant about it. We got to understand where we fall on the global map, but we, the United States, are trying to elevate that, and we do have some opportunities in the future to raise the bar and become more relevant on the global stage. I would love to get your comments on this. Am I right? Am I wrong? Where does USA-Mexico fall in the global rankings of international rivalries? What'd you think about that game last night? What do you think about Berhalter? We can always get some comments in there about him. Get down in that comment section. Let me know. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Hit that button down below if you're on YouTube. Follow the podcast on Spotify if you're listening on there. And, of course, follow us on Twitter at Pitchside Pub. Thanks, as always, for joining us on La Pausa, a Pints and Punditry podcast here at the Pitchside Pub.